Hey guys, great job being here. Let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. Grover curled up on a turnip sack. Annabeth opened our bag of double-stuffed Oreos and nibbled on one half-heartedly. I tried to cheer myself up by concentrating on the fact that we were halfway to Los Angeles. Halfway to our destination. It was only June 14th. The solstice wasn't until 21st. We could make it in plenty of time. On the other hand, I had no idea what to expect. The gods kept toying with me. At least Hephaestus had the decency to be honest about it. He put up cameras and advertised me as entertainment. But even when the cameras weren't rolling, I had a feeling my quest was being watched. I was a source of amusement for the gods. "Hey," Annabeth said. "I'm sorry for freaking out back at the water park, Percy." "That's okay." "It's just," she shuddered, "spiders." "Because of Arachne's story, I guess. She got turned into a spider for challenging your mom to a weaving contest, right?" Annabeth nodded. "Arachne's children have been taking revenge on the children of Athena ever since. If there's a spider within a mile of me, it'll find me. I hate the creepy little things. Anyway, I owe you." "We're a team, remember," I said. "Besides, Grover did the fancy flying." I thought he was asleep, but he mumbled from the corner. "I was pretty amazing, wasn't I?" Annabeth and I laughed. She pulled apart an Oreo, handing me half. In the iris message, did Luke really say nothing? I munched my cookie and thought about how to answer. The conversation via Rainbow had bothered me all evening. Luke said you and he go all the way back. He said Grover wouldn't fail this time. Nobody would turn into a pine tree. In the dim bronze light of the sword blade, it was hard to read their expressions. Grover let out a mournful bray. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." His voice trembled. "I thought if you knew what a failure I was, you wouldn't want me to come along." "You were the satyr who tried to rescue Thalia from the daughter of Zeus?" He nodded glumly. "And the other two half-bloods Thalia befriended, the ones who got safely to camp?" I looked at Annabeth. "Was that you and Luke, wasn't it?" She put down her Oreo uneaten. "Like you said, Percy, a 7-year-old half-blood wouldn't have made it very far alone. Athena's guided me towards help. Thalia was 12. Luke was 14. They both run away from home like me. They're happy to take me with them. They were amazing monster fighters, even without training. We traveled north from Virginia without any real plans, fending off monsters for about 2 weeks before Grover found us." "I wasn't supposed to escort Thalia to camp," he said, sniffling. "Only Thalia. I had strict orders from Sharon. Don't do anything that would slow down the rescue. We knew Hades was after her, see, but I couldn't just leave Luke and Annabeth by themselves. I thought I could lead all 3 of them to safety. It was my fault the kindly ones caught up with us." I froze. I got scared on the way back to camp and took some wrong turns. If only I'd just been a little quicker. "Stop it," Annabeth said. "No one blames you. Thalia didn't blame you either." "She'd sacrificed herself to save us," he said miserably. "Her death was my fault. The Council of the Cloven Elder said so." "Because you wouldn't leave 2 other half-bloods behind," I said. "That's not fair." "Percy's right," Annabeth said. "I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you, Grover. Neither would Luke. We don't care what the Council says." Grover kept sniffling in the dark. "It's just my luck. I'm the latest satyr ever. And if I find the 2 most powerful half-bloods of the century, Thalia and Percy—" "You're not lame," Annabeth insisted. "You've got more courage than any satyr I've ever met. Name one other who would dare go to the underworld. I bet Percy's really glad you're here right now." She kicked me in the shin. "Yeah," I said, which would have been done even without the kick. "It's not your luck that you found Thalia and me, Grover. You got the biggest heart of any satyr ever. You're a natural searcher. That's why I'll be the one who finds Pan." I heard a deep, satisfied sigh. I waited for Grover to say something, but his breath only got heavier. When the sound turned to snoring, I realized he'd fallen asleep. "How does he do that?" I marveled. "I don't know," Annabeth said, "but that was a really nice thing you told him." "I meant it." We rode in silence for a few miles, bumped around on the feed sacks. The zebra munched a turnip. The lion licked the last bit of hamburger meat off his lips and looked at me hopefully. Annabeth rubbed her necklace like she was thinking deep, strategic thoughts. "That pine tree bread," I said. "Is that from your first year?" She looked. She hadn't realized what she was doing. "Yeah," she said. "Every August, the counselors picked the most important event of the summer, and they painted on that year's beads. I've got Thalia's pine tree, a Greek triumph of fire, a centitard, and a prom dress. Now that was a weird summer. And the college ring's your father's? That's none of your—" She stopped. Yeah, it is. You don't have to tell me." "No, it's okay." She took a shaky breath. "My father sent it to me folded up in a letter 2 summers ago. The ring was like his main keepsake from Athena. He wouldn't have gotten through his doctoral program at Harvard without her. That's a long story. Anyway, he said he wanted me to have it. He apologized for being a jerk, said he loved me and missed me. He wanted me to come home and live with him. That doesn't sound so bad." "Yeah, well, the problem is, I believed him. I tried to go home for that school year, but my stepmom was the same as ever. She didn't want her kids put in danger by living with a freak. Monsters attacked, we argued, monsters attacked, we argued. I didn't even make it through winter break. I called Sharon and came right back to Camp Half-Blood." "You'll think you'll ever try to live with your dad again?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Please, I'm not into self-inflicted pain." "You shouldn't give up," I told her. "You should write him a letter or something." "Thanks for the advice," she said coldly. "But my father's made his choice about who he wants to live with." We passed another few miles in silence. "So if the gods fight," I said, "will things line up the way they did before the Trojan War? Will it be Athena's versus Poseidon?" She put her head against the backpack Ares had given us and closed her eyes. "I don't know what my mom will do. I just know I'll fight next to you." "Why?" "Because you're my friend, seaweed brain. Any more questions?" I couldn't think of an answer for that. Fortunately, I didn't have to. Annabeth was asleep. I had trouble following her example, with Grover snoring and an albino lion staring hungrily at me, but I eventually closed my eyes. My nightmare started out as something I dreamed a million times before. I was being forced to take a standardized test while wearing a straitjacket. All the other kids were going out to recess, and the teacher kept saying, "Come on, Percy, you're not stupid, are you? Pick up your pencil." Then the dream strayed from the usual. I looked over at the next desk and saw a girl sitting there, also wearing a straitjacket. She was my age, with unruly black punk-style hair, dark eyeliner around her stormy green eyes, and freckles across her nose. Somehow I knew who she was. She was Thalia, the daughter of Zeus. She struggled against the straitjacket and glared at me in frustration and snapped, "Well, seaweed brain, one of us has got to get out of here." She's right, my dream self thought. I'm going back to that cavern. I'm going to give Hades a piece of my mind. The straitjacket melted off of me. I fell through the classroom floor. The teacher's voice changed until it was cold and evil, echoing from the depths of the chasm. "Percy Jackson," it said. "Yes, the exchange went well, I see." I went back to the dark cavern, spirits of the dead drifting around me. Unseen in the pit, the monstrous thing was speaking, but this thing, it wasn't addressing me. The numbing power of its voice seemed directed somewhere. "And he suspects nothing?" it asked. Another voice, one I almost recognized, answered at my shoulder. "Nothing, my lord. He's as ignorant as the rest." I looked over, but there was no one there. The speaker was invisible. "Deception upon deception," the thing in the pit mused aloud. "Excellent." "Truly, my lord," said the thing next to me. "You are well named, the Crooked One. But it was really necessary. I could have brought you directly. I stole it to you directly." "You," the monster said in scorn. "You've already shown your limits. You would have failed me somehow if I'd not intervened." "But, my lord—" "Peace, little servant. Our 6 months have brought us back much. Zeus's anger's grown. Poseidon has played his most desperate card. Now we should use it against him. Shortly you shall have your reward you wished and your revenge. As soon as both items are delivered to my hands. But wait, he's here." "What?" The invisible serpent suddenly sounded tense. "You summoned him, my lord?" "No!" The full force of Monster's attention was now pouring over me, freezing me in my place. "Blast his father's blood! He's too changeable, too unpredictable. The boy brought himself hither." "Impossible!" the serpent cried. "For a weakling such as you, perhaps," the voice snarled. Then the cold power turned back on me. "So, you wish to dream of your quest, young half-blood? Then I will oblige." The scene changed. I was standing in the vast throne room with black marble walls and bronze floors. The empty, horrid throne was made from human bones fused together. Standing at the back of the daisies was my mother, frozen in shimmering gold light, her arms outstretched. I tried to step towards her, but my legs wouldn't move. I reached for her, only to realize my hands were withering to bones. Grinning skeletons in Greek armor crowded around me, draping me with silk robes, wreathing my hands with laurels that smoked with chimaera poison, burning into my scalp. The evil voice began to laugh. "Hail the conquering hero!" I woke with a start. Grover was shaking my shoulder. "The truck stop," he said. "We think they're coming to check on the animals." "Hide," Annabeth hissed. She had it easy. She put on her magic cap and disappeared. Grover and I had to dive behind feed sacks and hope we looked like turnips. The trailer doors creaked open. Sunlight and heat poured in. "Man," one of the truckers said, waving his hand in front of his ugly nose, "I wish I hauled appliances." He climbed inside and poured some water into the jug of the animals' dishes. "You hot, big boy?" he asked the lion, and then splashed the rest of the bucket in the lion's face. The lion roared with indignation. Yeah, the man said. Next to me, under his turnip sacks, Grover tensed. For peace-loving herbivore, he looked downright murderous. The trucker threw the antelope a squashed-looking Happy Meal bag. He smirked at that zebra. "How you doing, Stripes? Least we'll be here with you at the stop. You like magic shows? You're gonna love this one. They're gonna saw you in half." The zebra, wide-eyed with fear, looked straight at me. There was no sound, but clear as day I heard it say, "Free me, Lord, please." I was too stunned to react. There was a loud on the side of the trailer. The trucker inside with this yelled, "What do you want, Eddie?" A voice outside, it must have been Eddie, shouted back, "Maurice, what'd you say? What are you banging for?" Outside, Eddie yelled, "What banging?" Our guy Maurice rolled his eyes and went back outside, cursing at Eddie for being an idiot. A few seconds later, Annabeth appeared next to me. She must have done the banging to get Maurice out of the trailer. This transport business can't be legal. "No kidding," Grover said. He paused as if listening. "The line says these guys are animal smugglers." "That's right," the zebra voice said in my head. "We gotta free him," Grover said. He and Annabeth both looked at me, waiting for my lead. I'd heard the zebra talk, but not the lion. Why, maybe it was another learning disability. I can only understand zebras? Then I thought, horses. What if Annabeth said about Poseidon creating horses? Was a zebra close enough to a horse? Was that why I could understand it? The zebra said, "Open my cage, Lord, please. I'll be fine after that." Outside, Eddie and Maurice were still yelling at each other, but I knew they'd be coming back inside to torment the animals again any minute. I grabbed Riptide and slashed the locks off the zebra's cage. The zebra busted out. It turned to me and bowed. "Thank you, Lord." Grover held up his hands and said something to the zebra and goat like a blessing. Just as Maurice was poking his head back inside to check out the noise, the zebra leaped over him into the street. There was yelling and screaming and cars honking. We rushed to the doors of the trailer in time to see the zebra galloping down a wide boulevard lined hotels and casinos and neon signs. We'd just released a zebra in Las Vegas.